গানটির নাম হচ্ছে দাঁড়িয়ে আছো তুমি আমার গানের উপরে আর গানটি রবীন্দ্রসঙ্গীত সারা বাঙালি অনেকেই জানবেন I am happy to share this with you like a rendition of it well I mean not a thought out rendition just more of improv I guess in a way that's most meaningful for me and I'm happy to share that with you I hope you enjoy it not possible to have a party tonight but I hope you do
Absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much, Nianta, for that wonderful performance. And we got another performance coming up. So we got Tanita Tasneem, who is from Bangladesh and has a deep love for Bengali arts and culture. She is a staff assistant for the Department of Analysis, Assessment, and Accreditation in the Provost's office at USU. And she'll be reading the poem Banglata Tik Ashena from the poet Bobani Prashad Mujumdar. Nianta, do you have any corrections that you must make happen?
So it took me a second to realize who we were introducing. Okay, so the name of the piece of the poem is Banglata Tik Ashena. And I'm not sure about the writer's name. Give me 1 second, I'll pull it up. Okay, I think it's Bhabani Prashad Mujumdar.
Yeah, that BH sound. I love it and I am learning it and I appreciate y'all all so much for your patience. So 1 second as I pull this up on my share screen.
ছেলে আমার খুব সিরিয়াস কথায় কথায় হাসে না জানেন দাদা আমার ছেলের বাংলাটা ঠিক আসে না ইংলিশেও রাইমস বলে ডিবেট করে পড়াও চলে আমার ছেলে খুব পজিটিভ অলিক স্বপ্নে ভাসে না জানেন দাদা আমার ছেলের বাংলাটা ঠিক আসে না। ইংলিশ ওর গুলে খাওয়া, ওটাই ফার্স্ট ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজ। হিন্দি সেকেন্ড, সত্যি বলছি, হিন্দিতে ওর দারুণ তেজ। কি লাভ বলুন বাংলা পড়ে, বিমান ছেড়ে ঠেলায় চড়ে। বেঙ্গলি থার্ড ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজ, তাই তেমন ভালোবাসে না। জানেন দাদা, আমার ছেলের বাংলাটা ঠিক আসে না। বাংলা আবার ভাষা নাকি, নেই কোনো চার্ম বেঙ্গলিতে? সহজ সরল এই কথাটা লজ্জা কিসের মেনে নিতে? ইংলিশ ভেরি ফ্যান্টাস্টিক, হিন্দি সুইট সায়েন্টিফিক, বেঙ্গলি ইজ গ্ল্যামারলেস, ওর প্লেস এদের পাশে না। জানেন দাদা, আমার ছেলের বাংলাটা ঠিক আসে না। বাংলা যেন কেমন কেমন, খুব দুর্বল প্যানপেনে, শুনলে বেশি গা জ্বলে যায়, একঘেয়ে আর ঘ্যানঘ্যানে। কিসের গরব কিসের আশা, আর চলে না বাংলা ভাষা। কবে যেন বেঙ্গলি ডে, ফেব্রুয়ারি মাসে না? জানেন দাদা, আমার ছেলের বাংলাটা ঠিক আসে না। ইংলিশ বেশ বোমবাস্টিক, শব্দে ঠাসা দারুণ ভাষা। বেঙ্গলি ইজ ডিসকাস্টিং, ডিসকাস্টিং সর্বনাশা। এই ভাষাতে দিবানিশি হয় শুধু ভাই পিএনপিসি। এই ভাষা তাই হলেও দিশি, সবাই ভালোবাসে না। জানেন দাদা, আমার ছেলের বাংলাটা ঠিক আসে না। বাংলা ভাষা নিয়েই নাকি অ্যাংলা প্যাংলা সবাই মুগ্ধ। বাংলা যাদের মাতৃভাষা, বাংলা যাদের মাতৃদুগ্ধ। মায়ের দুধের বড়ই অভাব, কৌটার দুধ খাওয়াই স্বভাব। ওই দুধে তেজ তাকত হয় না, বাংলাও তাই হাসে না। জানেন দাদা, আমার ছেলের বাংলাটা ঠিক আসে না।
Another wonderful performance. And now we are ready to transition to the live poets that we have for the evening, who I am all so excited about. So we're going to start with Anuradha Bhowmik. Anuradha is a Bangladeshi-American poet and writer from South Jersey. She is a 2018 AWP Intro Journals Project winner in poetry, and she earned her MFA from Virginia Tech. Anuradha has received awards from the Kimmel Harding Nelson Center for the Arts, the Community of Writers, the New York State Summer Writers Institute, the Fine Arts Work Center in Provincetown, the Frost Place, the Indiana University Writers Conference, Deep Breath, the Eckerd College Writers Conference, the Juniper Summer Writing Institute, among others. So that wasn't even all of them. Her poetry and prose has appeared in Diode Poetry Journal, The Sun, Diagram, Indiana Review, Quarterly West, The Offing, Bayou Magazine, Crab Orchard Review, Classic Places, Copper Nickel, Ninth Letter Online, a whole bunch of your favorite literary magazines. She's an absolutely terrific writer and reader, and we're so excited to have her. Anuradha, please join us.
Okay, so before I start my poems, I have a bit of a story for this first one, because I wanted to make myself seem approachable before I go into these really sad poems after the second one. But anyway, so in case anyone needed a story to make them feel better today, I got my very first B+ in Bollywood cinema in college. So, you know, which is kind of embarrassing because I'm brown, but like, the very first day of class, you know, like as in any other class, you have to introduce yourselves. And I introduced myself as Anuradha because, as you'll find out in my poem, that was the way that I was taught to pronounce my name ever since kindergarten. And that's how I introduced myself going into the rest of my years in school. So I am going to start with a poem about my name, because I think that a lot of times in when I'm around other like Indian people and Bangladeshi people, they're always like, you know, they'll correct my pronunciation of my name and say, do you mean Anuradha? So I'm just gonna start with this poem, and then I'm gonna read through the rest of them until I get to my set of poems, which are the AOL Instant Messenger poems, and then I'll explain them a little bit. And thank you for listening. Elegy 1998. I first heard the American pronunciation of my name in kindergarten. We practiced handwriting with chunky Ticonderoga pencils and 3-lined paper, 2 solid green lines with red dashes in between. I wrote Onu over and over. My Doc Nam at home meant bright star in Bangla. My blonde Bob teacher wrote INC for incomplete, attached Radha in red pen. You need to practice writing your name, Anuradha. Radha was the Hindu goddess of love and good luck. I told the teacher my name was Anuradha, Onu for short. Don't talk back to me. The first language I spoke had 11 vowels. Ma and Baba spoke broken Bangla English. They mailed letters to Bangladesh in orange envelopes. The return address in jumbled capital and lowercase, extra loops and curls in the letters. I learned about abbreviation. When I got my first B in handwriting, the report card comments noted U for unsatisfactory. I practiced my penmanship till the letters straighten, the page is clean of eraser residue. I crafted my American name inside Lisa Frank folders, wore a Barbie clip in my black hair for the Life Touch portrait. I lost the aspirated last syllable of my name when I was 6. In the American alphabet, it did not exist. Model minority. Bengali girls couldn't have crushes in 4th grade, and I was afraid to make eye contact with the white boy in accelerated math who wore AND1 attire with Nikes, seated beside the hand-cranked pencil sharpener that I'd passed to turn in my problem-solving worksheet face down in the letter tray beside the overhead projector. I took a dip in the communal cup of dull-tipped Ticonderogas to delay the walk of shame back to my desk, where I trace his name on the tabletop with a bare fingertip and wipe the wood clean. Fists clamped with guilt for having girl-boy fantasies during the similar shapes lesson. I'd picture our names on popsicle sticks pulled from the teacher's mug, making us partners for pegboard geometry. First period spent stretching rubber bands into symmetrical shapes. I tried to forget the probability of facing the wooden spoon at home if I lost points again, daydreaming during the next time tests. Brown kids didn't get B's in math. So I waited till bedtime to practice kissing the talking geosafari globe that gave geography lessons during our mouth-to-mouth contact. When it was turned on and I paused to think, it whistled to make sure I was paying attention to the game. I'd never be a Candygram girl, but I dropped hints in class, hiking the Hanes panties inches above the waistband of my mud jeans, hoping the AND1 white boy would see past the gifted and talented, spot the cotton with a Pocahontas print, and eventually agree to be my John Smith. Abnegation. It was still acceptable to wear lip gloss with glitter when blowjobs appeared in adolescent vocabulary, but a white boy's initials on my hand was the closest I'd get to physical contact. My friend saved me posters of Jesse McCartney from the stapled centerfolds of Tiger Beat and J14. At home, Ma left glossy, scotch-taped corners on the bedroom wall. White boys will never respect you. Girls wanted poker straight hair back when they fake assed out boys for their friends. I don't date Hindus. I tugged the red thread on my wrist, washed off initials before I went home. I had no middle name. White girls had monogrammed acronyms on their backpacks, 3 letters, like the I love SOS written anonymously on a stall door. It stood for someone special. I wasn't fooling anyone. I borrowed shorts with cutie on the back, but I still had 2 letters to my name. Knew Hindu girls couldn't have crushes. AB knew to shut a barbed wire mouth behind a lockless bedroom door. Her grip on me tightened. It was still acceptable to wear pink lip gloss with glitter. The makeup bag grabbed off the nightstand. I prayed to Takur for forgiveness, pressed my forehead to elders' feet. I was chunks of blush from the compact crushed against the temple. Okay, so for the next 3 poems, it's from this series of poems that are called Receipts from AOL Instant Messenger. And so I'm gonna start with, describing like, the structure of the I am, or, I'm just gonna go into it. But it'll be the away message, and then as I progress through the poem, it'll be a definition, and then an acrostic poem from the original word in the away message or the buddy info profile. So if it start like, so there'll be like a tonal shift when I'm going through like the AOL it's messenger, which is like Candy Dandy 24 was my screen name from back in the day. But, and then this will be kind of like a dictionary definition with an acrostic to spell out like the, you know, like the slang language that was used on AOL Messenger back in the day to kind of give context to what was going on in my life as Candy Danny 24, which was my screen name. Okay, so I'll start now. Receipts from AOL Instant Messenger 3. Candy Dandy 24. Enter new away message. Be back later, about to scrunch my hair. Scrunch, verb. She communicated in shades of blue. Once she caught me with the blue bottle of got-to-be hair gel. I bought it with my own money, I said. Ma replied, is that what your white friends taught you? There were blows before I fell. The carpet was red. Under her foot, she trapped my wet hair. All of it pulled back into a ponytail. No time for gel. I had no doubts about her next steps when the alpha dog gripped the gel bottle like a gavel. Her correspondence was color-coded, her verdict signed in blue. Your own money? Not in my house. She stamped me with blues. The bottle didn't break. Nothing could ever stop her. Receipts from AOL Instant Messenger 5. Buddy info, Candy Dandy 24. Personal profile. Bo Mickey, you're so fine, you blow my mind. Bo Mickey, noun. Baba never hit me. From him, I acquired my last name. To survive, he lent me amnesia. He fueled the light in my memory. The cerebellum regulates language production and procedural learning. Our routine was mechanical. Ma hits you because she loves you. She spoke with swollen marks and fists as punctuation. While I called for Baba in 2-syllable units, he listened to the TV talked. Garbled phonetic parts fell from my mouth while Ma's throat rang with taut vocal cords. I was nourished by imperatives. Apologize to her now. I pressed my forehead to Ma's feet, so we can have peace in this house again. Afterwards, Baba drove me to Kmart. I offered my apologies as barter. I said sorry, and he bought me a mood bracelet kit. I said sorry to get the gel pens with glitter. With enough compensation, I could fill my voids. If only my younger self could return those gifts. If only I could unlearn the dialect that I translated as love. Receipts from AOL Instant Messenger 8. Buddy info, Candy Dandy 24. Personal profile. Anuradha is totally bangable. Bangable, adjective. Back when I could rely on puberty to keep me ugly, I pledged my loyalty to the white girls. After you get used to it, you won't feel it, they said, gifting me my first thong. We played Kill Fuck Mary on notebook paper. We dialed star 67 and called 1-800-HOT-LIPS. The white girls renamed me Andy and left glossy mouth marks on me. Ma told me I couldn't talk to boys. This reduced the risk of pregnancy to 0. Anonymously in health class, I asked how female condoms should be worn. Girls don't use condoms. My brown girl body was primed for atrophy. The white girls couldn't protect me from the shapes of a man. I learned to vacate my body instead. The white girls taught me how to play MASH. Close your eyes. When you're ready, say stop. To search for a Polaroid memory other than my own. Field Notes 5. 1. I wanted to locate my roots in some place sexy. When I took the DNA test at 24, I wanted scientific evidence that exotic could designate anything except for a fetish. 2. As the sum of my saliva on swabs, I was an ugly American kid, the brown girl hiding behind her books, and I built up my brain as compensation. 3. Before I rewrote the dictionary's definitions into a marble notebook, before I watched the educational programming on PBS Kids, before I memorized decks of Brain Quest cards, I was born Bangladeshi with A positive blood. 4. I wanted to know if my bloodline fucked white people and if that was why my family, or what I knew of it, was fosha and thereby beautiful according to the Bangladeshi eye. 5. With my bloodline and me trapped inside helices, the DNA test confirmed my homogeneity. 84% Central and South Asian, 14% East Asian. The remaining trace results were dismissed due to experimental error. 6. I was just another brown bitch. 7. When I returned to the country of my birth, I was 21. I was Bideshi, a foreigner in Dhaka streets, in my pink Banana Republic shirt dress and black jeans, in my Americana marked fuckworthy, as aspirated consonants fell from men's mouths. I still don't know all the bad words in Bangla, but I knew those words. In Dhaka's 100-degree streets, I tried to dress modestly, to look like a real Bengali girl. I bought tailor-made Bangladeshi clothes to pass as a real Bengali girl. 8. Before I left, my relatives in Bangladesh told me that if I never opened my mouth of broken Bangla, and if I ever wore a sari or a salar kameez, that any Bangladeshi could still look at me and know instantly that I wasn't a woman of their country. I tried to be a good Bangladeshi girl. Before Ma crushed the Lancome blush against my skull, before I prepped for sexy time a decade prior to the possibility, before the white girls in middle school established definitions for the 4 bases, before the Burn book and the Click series provided guidelines for being a cunt, before 9/11 made me the Polaroid of a terrorist, before I became the wrong kind of brown, before the Little League softball team truncated me to Addie, before the JV team printed Anaconda on the back of my jersey, before I took 2 out-of-school suspensions, before I worried I'd end up in juvie, before I wore the Aeropostale polo with the butterfly logo, before I unbuttoned the polo in the bathroom stall at school, before I tried to pass as the right kind of brown, before I walked ahead of Ma in public, before other Bengalis mistook me as Latina, before my fingernails peeled from the acrylics, before I illustrated my lack of impulse control at school, before I buried my fists inside my skull, before La La by Ashley Simpson became my favorite song, before I knew the song was about masturbation, before the white girl made a grade-wide PSA that I got my period, before I asked Yahoo Answers about tampon insertion, before my friends and I took photos of us sticking out our tongues, before Ma tore up the photos and called my friends sluts, before I knew I was an abomination in the eyes of Takur, before the guidance counselor knew about Ma and did nothing, Before Ma caught me dancing to Young Jeezy in my bedroom. Before Ma caught me in the black bikini with rhinestones. Before Ma and Baba's threats to send me to foster care. Before I recognized Baba's complicity. Before Ma saw my friends talking to boys after school. Before Ma drove me home and said, cut the friendship in English. Before I drew devil horns on Ma's self-portrait from Bangladesh. Before Ma cried. Before I wore pigtails with denim skirts. Before I turned 12 and entered the world of the cat call. Before I stopped talking to Ma and Baba in Bangla. Before English vitriol scorched my vocal cords. Before Ma fired back with Bengali invective. Before I struggled to tell Ma I loved her. Before I grew 3 inches taller than Ma. Before I lost each strand of my childhood vocal cords. Before I learned about the blood-brain barrier. Before I became my only defender. Okay, this is my last poem. First comes poetry, then comes makeup. I can't say I hate what I see in the mirror, and no, I don't make my face flawless for the male gaze that can't even detect the difference between Max Ruby Woo and Russian Red. And yes, I have a women's studies degree. And yes, I was informed that the beauty industry supports the patriarchy and shames female aging. And while I consider that to be more of a white feminist fixation, makeup is my own shit, my second art, the perfect counterpart to my alter ego, the beauty addict, the bad bitch, the freak. And yes, this obsession stems from respectability politics and being born a brown female who happens to like women. And yes, a brown female is in fact chained to compulsory heterosexuality in its most restrictive form. I know the terms and conditions, the burden of this body. Please forgive me for the disconnect between my outer and inner selves, for my permanent mental violence. My second art is the closest I'll ever get to having any other body, any other life than this one. And when brown heteropatriarchy coerces me to marry a man, I refuse to compromise on my plot to marry a tall motherfucker who will be hot enough to hold my hand in public and rich enough to subsidize my trips to Sephora and Ulta without hesitation. My type of man is wealth, status, reputation. My man is the perfect counterpart to this body set to atrophy. If my second art was meant for men, then this consumer-driven coping mechanism would be less about femmes and more about manipulating him and him and him in his own world repeatedly. But first comes writing. The first art allows for direct access into the limbic system. After my first art parses my archaeology, my second art keeps me sane. It tames my ingrained guilt, the conflagration in my poet brain that tells me that if God is real, he fucking hates me. And every man that could have or couldn't love me fucking hates me. And I don't deserve anything I've ever wanted. My second art is mechanical. It follows procedure, while my body and my brain remain insubordinate. Human beings adopt countless methods for survival to temporarily tolerate distress. My second art keeps me glossed. Preserve this glaze. I am not whole, and I do not know which version of myself to accept. And no, this is not sustainable. And yes, this is a man's world. And yes, my second art is still mine. My Bobby Brown Skin Foundation, my Urban Decay Perversion Mascara, my Glossier Boy Brow, my mouth painted androgyny, my Trophy Wife Highlight, my Frat Boy Blush, my matte black Stay All Day Cat Eye, my Cocoa Contour chiseled to perfection, my face beat for the gods. My Holy Grail beauty products are my royal protectors. See my vanity? This is my kingdom. This is something I can control. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Anuradha, for blessing this Zoom room with your wonderful words. Up next, we have Tarfia. Ooh. Sorry, my dog's nose pressed the button. Up next, we have Tarfia. Tarfia Faizullah was born in Brooklyn, New York, to Bangladeshi immigrants and raised in Texas. She is the author of 2 poetry collections, registers of Illuminated Villages and Seam. Her writing has appeared widely in the US and abroad in the Daily Star, BuzzFeed, Hindu Business Line, Huffington Post, Miss Magazine, The New Republic, The Nation, Oxford American, Poetry Magazine, and the Academy of American Poets website, as well as the anthology Halal If You Hear Me from Haymarket Books. That's a part of their Breakbeat Poets series, a really great one that Haymarket has been putting out. And she's been on the television show PBS NewsHour. Faizullah's writing has been translated into Bengali, Persian, Chinese, and Tamil, and was included in the theater production Barangona, Woman of War. Her collaborations include photographers, producers, composers, filmmakers, musicians, and visual artists, resulting in several interdisciplinary projects, including an EP, Eat More Mango. In 2016, Harvard Law School included Faizullah in their list of 50 women inspiring change. Thank you so much for being with us today, Tarfia. Can you please join us and take over the Zoom room now?
Hi, it's so good to be here with y'all. Shubho Nobobarsha, Happy New Bengali New Year to y'all. That was so beautiful, Anuradha. Thank you so much for sharing those poems. I felt like I was time traveling through so many different parts of my life as you were reading, and I felt like you showed us so much, and so I'm very grateful. I'm going to read, in the spirit of Bengali newness, I'm going to read new work. I'm going to start with a poem called Infinity Ghazal, beginning with lice and never ending with lies. And I wrote this poem originally for an aunt of mine that passed away, whose name is Husna Henna, which is Bangla for night blooming jasmine. So she's in this poem, and I dedicated this poem to the Rohingya, which is a definite challenge that I think Bangladesh is facing. So keeping them in mind as well. So this is Infinity Ghazal, beginning with lice and never ending with lies, for Husna Henna and the Rohingya. Lice, my aunt once drew a comb through my hair steady. She wouldn't let what feeds on blood eat my inner tree. Where now is the word for such intimacy? I know it still, but all I see are jungles burnt of our rarest trees. My point is, it takes a while to say, I am a fire hazard, or a household of rare birds is another way to say tree. I wrote one draft of this poem, and then she died. Will I forget her name, Husna Henna? Let's smell a tree. Night blooming jasmine, oh so heavenly. A sapling succeeds by flourishing from a tree's seed. How else to perfume these needs we breathe? A sapling, of course, equals a small and soft tree, i.e. baby tree. I grieve the rice she fed me off a palm leaf. Only now can I fully marvel how finely formed is a tree. Someone I loved said to stop with the oceans in my poems. Well, oceans and oceans and oceans. We drown so many trees. Night blooming tree is a baby tree, is a once and future tree. Lately, all I think about are trees. Read this again to replace tree with refugee. Tarfia equals joy in the margins, plus one who lies to protect trees. So I think for the rest of my time, I'm going to read from a new collection I'm working on. It's called Alien of Extraordinary Ability, which is a visa classification that US Immigration Services created for artists to be able to apply for an emergency visa, basically. And so I've been thinking a lot about, I guess, a couple of different things. I think I'm thinking about how Bengali's relationship to the past is often through nostalgia. And there's a part of me that I've been thinking a lot about the future. So I imagine one of the speakers of the poems I'm going to read to be a person who hasn't been born yet, an artist who is born in the future. And I call her Nayantara Chaudhary. And so seeing Nayanta today was really great because her name sounds so much like the character that I've kind of created to write these poems. So there are two different characters. There's Nayanta's character, and she's an artist who is writing poems in the future. And there's another character who is somebody who's in this moment, who is just received a visa to come and be in America to be an artist. And so she is moving through a museum, and some of the artworks are created by this kind of future artist. This is very much in progress, so none of it makes complete sense yet to me, but hopefully it all hangs together in some kind of way. And there's an epigraph by Rabindranath Tagore, who we've already heard from today, and the quote is, "When one knows thee, then alien there is none, then no door is shut." And that's from Gitanjali. Let's begin. Why do you want this visa? Home. Why this country? The gathering, the well-accommodated individuals. What are your plans here? Everyone likes sweet stuff sometimes. Ice cream, tea, coffee caramel. To sit with sweet people, to listen, a same sweet song, a life hammock, to arrive, to drive past ships in the life of night, to be a star seer, to build a spaceship out of the years named solace. What is your name? Listen to the Moon by Nayantara Chaudhary, acrylic on canvas, 21st century. I ash on my granite heart. I stub a smoke out on my granite heart. This, nightly, for weeks. My granite heart grows a thick layer of ash. I do not notice until I do. I tip my granite heart into the sink. I rinse my granite heart with lavender hand soap. I scrub my granite heart. There is more than one burn mark. I touch each faint, dull trace. I turn away. I leave my granite heart to soak. Personal ornaments, collar discs, scepters and early imagery, Neolithic axes of the culture, blades, dagger axes, arrowheads and knives, serrated discs, ceremonial blades, serrated and axes, handles, animal heads and masks, dragons, fish, birds, naturalistic animals, insects, surface decoration, dish with coiled bird and dragon interlacery, shroud, plaque. This is a museum. I am making a list to keep thoughts of you at bay. So it is to hold a conversation with idea you, i.e. your absence. I want to pause here and just say that one of these characters is very lovelorn, and she's thinking about somebody as she's moving through this museum space. I.e., be my young, wearing a gold chain. I'll decorate our wedding night with flower garlands and blue curtain drape, okay? Let's begin the music lesson, the family concert, give rise to the interior of, fly across the world and see fishing boats in a calm, fishing in an estuary, landscape, the ruins of, river landscape, a view of, 2 cows and young bull beside a fence, a meadow, the watermill, the great red roof, be our own landscape with travelers, see a boy blowing a firebrand, an enchantress, see everywhere a battle between the gods and the giants. So be an artist wearing a capitalist's pajamas. So be a capitalist unbuttoning an artist's shirt. So be perpetually an orange lion in a suit saying shh, head of a buried man, an open half door. So do what we said we weren't going to do. One day I'll give you all of February, Russian doll style. Eklacholo, eklacholo, eklacholore. A mortifying ordeal to be seen. My Grandmother's Window by Nayantara Chaudhary. And Linen and Circuit Board, 21st Century. There was a window. Those evenings, after a day during discipline, I'd stare at the window from my little landing across the way and the dogwood tree. My thoughts were a new species of firefly undiscovered as of yet. The window belonged to other occupants, but I didn't care who they were, i.e., it wasn't my window, i.e., economy and society. But I felt a kinship with it. The dogwood silhouette rescued the window from being a plain old pane of glass. A specific leaf would sway, and a twilight at that. That leaf took on a worldly density as if inked. Like a painting? No, a summons, as if the window was an oracle, an opening to a wild where we could be ourselves for a spell. Oof, the largeness of feeling window gave as I gazed at her from my still little life. The glossy blackness of her leaf, window, she was me, her branch, her tree, wind, light rain, Texas, 2020, and there she was, what I still am, a child, an alien, an invasion. I can't tell you why I couldn't stop staring at that window, a kitchen window of all things. Mercy. It was or wasn't a window. It's the shoebox my cousin kept her hand-fashioned dolls in, Bula Apu, what I called her, not her real name. It's the screen I slumped before to wade worn and wide emails. I didn't fall behind, but politely and discreetly apart. Dogwood, window, the wasps repurposing the arm of that plastic wicker chair into a home. The pair of mockingbirds alighting so near, I felt, I swear, on the inside, the gentleness of their feathers. Imagine an ordinary afternoon. Some harm had occurred. I hadn't noticed until after, i.e., lately. I was alive, though, and staring. Recovery was a gentle and jagged reintroduction to my own wonder and curiosity. Where had she been? I can see it so clearly still. The window my gaze made of the wars that went on, all that thunder, a frequent stab of lighting. They returned eventually, my two minds, I mean, their limpid and lean logics. Mercy and time is exactly what I learned from a window. Bottle, plate, vase, plate, vase, dish, teapot, platter, water jug, coffee pot, tureen. Love Poem by Nayantara Chaudhary, Watercolor on Glass, 21st Century. Dear beast, you only respond to marrow scooped clean. Here is your bread, sliced into neat warm ovals. You stare, I touch your silk snout, we shiver. Some nights I let you kiss abruptly through the mask. You pant, I whisper, it's impossible. I make you anyway. Is it that you have nowhere to go? No, your family loves you. But here you are the only monster, the last and first star, the one in the clan who can't stay put. Tonight, like other nights, you arrive when you said you wouldn't. You cannot always afford me. I do not always have what you lope about looking for. Only we know how this works. Be still. It isn't so easy to keep the leash buckled to its collar. So good, this gallery, Idea U says. Yes, it is quite the door to 1,000 years ago. Shh, says our future child. Get the door. The wall opens. Here we are. Now see, the fields, sun and moon. Can you see the other families? Our family understands keyless entry and the door diaspora closes. So it is to touch the idea of you. No touching the art, security says. Okay, I say, okay, and part the regions of my torso. It's then I learn security is blind to my mockingbird inside. No touching the heart, security says. Okay, I say, okay, and part the pillars of darkness. Now walk towards flowering cherry and autumn maples, mockingbird commands. Do it, alone. Ready, set, Goa, a Chakma memory. Dyed fabric draping a bridge. Now spell matriarchy, mockingbird commands. L-O-V-E. The first word you learned in the enemy's language. A savage, angry joy takes hold. Idea U disappears. I leave the gallery or linger. I become an etching, window shopping, allusions to the sea, light palette, ewer and basin, Cupid and Psyche. I once was and will never again be, virgin and child, the rape of blank by blank. Are you also trying to understand what it is to be the master? And I'll stop there. Thank you all so much.
So excited for your new work, Tarfia. That glimpse into it was absolutely marvelous. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to all our poets, to our singer, to our readers today. And happy Bengali New Year. At this point, I do want to invite Niyonta and Anuradha and Tarfia to turn on their cameras. Audience, there is a Q&A function. So without taking too much time, I did want to give a little bit of opportunity to folks to ask questions if they wanted to. It's not often that we get to have such marvelous artists with us in our presence, even in the Zoomiverse. So we're extraordinarily grateful for that. So, all right, go ahead. I'll give you a little bit of time to type in your questions, but I guess I'll have this first question for Anuradha. What do you have in the works? Is there a debut collection that you're shopping out, or what can we expect? Where can we follow your growth as a poet and an artist? Mic's off.
Sorry. I did submit like my first manuscript to some first book contests, and if it's in, I'm like touching Simba right now. I'm not just like, but he was being annoying, so I'll just bring him over. Okay, so I submitted to some first book contests, so I'll see how that goes. But a lot of times when I just need to write, it kind of makes me feel better to like write in form. And I know like the AOL Instant Messenger poems are I don't know if I could call them a form, but when I need to write, it gives me a little bit more structure. And because especially on my like all the poems actually probably most of my poems are like sad and stuff, and it kind of gives me like more of a container to put all my trauma in when I can write them in a form, or like in whatever, like the AOL Instant Messenger acronym form. So I've been writing about that. I'm working on this creative nonfiction piece, which that I stepped away from, that it was about like my time in college and stuff. But so I'm working on that, but also just working on more like AOL Instant Messenger poems. If they make it into the first manuscript, that's it, or like whatever. But I'm just like happy that I'm writing and stuff, because I think that especially like when you get out of grad school and enter the workforce, it could be difficult to find time to making time for your writing and your art, but also like making money and stuff. So I think that I'm finally at a place where I can, you know, still write and work, because I think writers, well, I don't know, maybe, I think it's often that your day job isn't within like writing and stuff. So, but I'm glad that I can at least make some time to write now after, you know, yeah.
Yeah, and we're glad that you get to make the time too, Anuradha. There's a lot of gifts that you give the world because of that. Next question for Tarfia. So Tarfia, I guess the question I have for you as somebody who's had their work translated to Tamil and to Bangla is, what sort of reception have you been seeing happening internationally, especially in South Asia, for your work? I know that as a Salvadoran myself, and for a lot of diasporic poets, the tension between how diasporic people read your work versus how like Americans or outsiders read your work, for example, and how people in your homeland read your work. There's a lot of fruitful and sometimes tense conversations that comes from that dialogue. And I'm curious, what your experience has been having your work in translation, reading, you know, in South Asia, and how that's helped you grow your work, or what reflections of yourself you saw.
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say that the reception in Bangladesh towards my work has mostly been warm. I think that there are some people who struggle to acknowledge the war crimes that happened, particularly against women. And I don't think that that necessarily has anything to do with poetry itself or necessarily what I wrote, but more what I wrote about, and you know, a general denial people might have to want to face the horrors of the past and maybe acknowledge that, especially that women are a vulnerable part of the population, and often used as spoils in war. So I would say that it's mostly been warm, except for, I would say, deniers of that widespread terrible treatment of women. But I would also say that since SEAM, I had this funny thing happen where there's a poem from my second book, and it's called Self-Portrait as Mango, and it's in the anthology Halal, if you hear me. I didn't read it tonight, but this was, I was not on the internet for a few years. I just completely dropped off the face of the internet planet and deleted all of my accounts. I was having a moment. And I still, though, a friend of mine let me know that there was this person who was a Pakistani male artist who was kind of, I guess, like savagely talking about this particular poem. And I went and looked up the tweet, and he had really come after the poem, and then it had gotten like, I don't know, like well over 1,000 likes and a bunch of retweets, mostly by other people who were like, yeah, this poem is so horrible. These diaspora poets are the worst. They don't understand anything. They don't know anything. This is really terrible. And a lot of the folks on that thread were brown men, and it made me really angry for a lot of reasons, because I think, I don't know, but then I also was sort of like, if this poem is bothering you so much, why did you bother to take a picture of it and then post it, and then, you know, kind of spur people on who were destroying it? And some of the comments were kind of sexual and making jokes about mangoes that were not very pleasant. So this is all to say that I've had a number of different reactions to my work, and I think that I think that, you know, if I feel sort of like poems that make people angry are doing their own kind of work. So I don't take it too personally. Once I write something and I put it out in the world, you know, like I mostly sort of let go of it. But that particular instance was, I think, difficult for me to take, because I had sort of, whenever I'm writing, I'm always sort of like writing with, you know, maybe a naive idea of solidarity in mind. And so that reaction really surprised me, but yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing, Tarfia. I remember seeing that scuffle happen online, and it was like definitely jarring to, like, whenever I see tensions between homeland and diaspora, no matter what like national community you're coming from, it's always like, it hits me just because I know how fraught those conversations get, and the performance of identity and all of those things. And yeah, so thank you so much for sharing that. One question that I have for all three of you here. And this comes especially just from somebody who, like I was raised with the intergenerational kind of effects of warfare, right? And that's something that for Bangladeshis especially is super relevant and something that Tarfia, you write about in your work. And there's definitely these heavy topics y'all write about in your work. Anuradha, you talked about how you use form to help you contain it, which is something I've heard from a lot of artists, is that it helps them like put it somewhere, and the form gives them a shape where it can go. But for all three of you, I guess, how would you, what have you learned approaching these topics, I guess? Just because there's a lot of different communities out there who, you know, the legacy that they have to carry is one that carries a lot of violence in it sometimes, a lot of warfare in it sometimes, and especially being sometimes removed from that violence in the sense that like, oh, it was my mother who experienced the war in El Salvador and then the migration, not me. There's a tension in that perspective, and it's like close enough that it affects you in very real ways, but of course you haven't experienced it. So I guess, what have you learned approaching the difficult material like this and carrying that legacy? And what would you recommend to artists who, you know, are in a similar boat where this is the work that they have to do to heal, to, you know, do work in their communities? It's just their obsession. What would you kind of throw their way to help guide them?
So I didn't, the poems, I do have some poems that I wrote for like my first manuscript that addressed that because, but I didn't read them today. But my parents had, all of us had come over from Bangladesh on political asylum. And, you know, like I mentioned, my poems were Hindu. And there's, even today when I try to talk about it with them, there is, from what I gather from them, there is still like a significant divide between Hindus and Muslims in Bangladesh, and it's really difficult for me to try to talk to them about that. But I also have to respect that I didn't grow up within their circumstances, and you know, I always like try to tell them like, you know, it's like not okay to say certain things, but then it also reminds me of when you know, sometimes I wonder whether I'm being, I don't know, trying to tell them how to feel if it's not my life experience, whether that's like being disrespectful or ignorant on my part. So in terms of writing, I, you know, like all of my work is like autobiographical. I try my best just to write about what I know, but even if I don't agree with like, you know, the I guess like they are kind of discriminatory, like the views they hold, and a lot of my stuff is about how I disagree with like the viewpoints that my parents hold about the world. But even though like a lot of my writing is about like, you know, kind of trying to be American while still like and how it's in conflict with the way that they raised me and everything, I try not to delve into like how they may have experienced things. You know, I try to, but then it's also like, I know that a lot of people don't write like autobiographically. It's just something that I don't feel in my own writing. I think I'm like okay with just writing about my own life experience, but I don't like, I am mindful about not trying to, I guess, make a judgment on how they would feel, like, you know, trying to respect how they would feel and stuff. I don't know if I answered your question. I'm sorry.
No, it's helpful because I feel like so much of this work is wrestling with a lot of the things you were bringing up when you are doing this. And as much as we want clear-cut answers, a lot of time the best we can do is wrestle. So like even just sharing that process is really meaningful. And especially, yeah, coming from a diasporic community and, you know, having parents with wildly different views than you have sometimes, that's a huge tension in a lot of communities. So thank you for bringing that up, Anuradha. Nyanta, Tarfia, I'm not sure if either of you has something you'd want to contribute for that very complicated and messy question.
I can go first. Well, first of all, I want to say sorry, Tarfia, for your experiences with, I think you mentioned Twitter, right? That's just extremely terrible. And I feel like, you know, there is only so far you can go to escape misogyny. It's there in every part of the world in various degrees and in various like culturalized forms. It just looks different because of different cultures. But yeah, I'm really sorry that you experienced that. And also, Willie, thank you for that question. That's a really good question that I feel like I've been thinking about a lot and struggling with recently, because looking back at my poems, I realized that at least 50% out of all of the poems I've ever written are about the war, and also stories. And I think that's also very typical of the Bengali literature that I grew up with. Most writers, most Bengali Bangladeshi writers gain their momentum through writing about the war. And a big reason for that is because we grew up with that literature. So it's kind of a cycle. And like you mentioned, it's based on intergenerational trauma as well, because this war was just one generation ago, my parents' generation. So that's why I personally have been writing about it, just being aware of like the literature that I have consumed, but at the same time, realizing that I probably have secondary exposure to trauma because of that knowledge and awareness. And and also seeing how, you know, people in that area, in that South Asian, Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan, how people from these different regions treat each other. I mean, there are obviously, you know, amazing people, and like there are dialogues and conversations about these kinds of things too, but at the same time, there are also people who just use extremely terrible language that you would just not expect. And there's just so much viciousness that you wouldn't expect. So, you know, on the one hand, reading about that kind of literature and the history of the wars between all these countries, and then also being exposed to that kind of treatment. And for Bangladeshis, it's not like a three-way rivalry, because Bangladesh is a much poorer country than the other two countries. And I think that's something that's never part of the dialogue, because that's a very, I feel like, Western or American concept of like different like identities or privileges or socioeconomic statuses. So yeah, I've been thinking about all of these things a lot also because I've been in this country for 10 years now. And I'm starting to realize like how disconnected I am from my own culture. And what does that even mean? Like, I spent so much of my life writing about my culture and the wars that we experienced, and now I haven't even been back home in like 7 years. And I'm sure from what I hear from my friends, the country looks very different from what I remember. So is it even my country anymore? You know, I guess. And so for my advice for other writers who deal with intergenerational trauma and write literature that comes out of that kind of trauma, I guess my best advice would be to recognize why you're writing about it. If it's a healing process, and if it's a part of self-care, if it's doing anything good for you, or if your intention is to share the information, do something good for your communities, or if it's kind of like reliving the trauma, or if it's actually further traumatizing you. Because I think for any process, whether that's art or activism or, you know, your career, self-care is really important. And it's really important to recognize, you know, what's helping you and what's not helping you. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say for that.
A lot of clap emojis for especially mentioning that self-care. I feel like especially artists, especially writers, sometimes dive into heavier work without thinking critically about what sort of toll it's going to take on them and what sort of work it's doing in the world. So that's an extraordinarily important point. Tarfia, did you have anything you wanted to contribute to that? I saw you thinking a lot, which I was like, whoa, bombs might drop, but we'll see.
Well, I also continue to think about these issues a lot, and really loved both of your responses about it. Just to, I guess, pick up on a couple of things that got brought up. Like, I think that I used to romanticize, I think, artist burnout in a way, or sort of devotion to really difficult, heavy material, or sort of this feeling even of that, you know, in a way that we're all sort of pulling from the same, let's call it kind of like motherland grab bag of things, right? And so there is such a thing as, I guess, diaspora literature, but a lot of it is information. A lot of it is that we are creating a new tradition in real time, because Bangladesh wasn't even a country until 1971, for example. So there's Bengali culture, and then there's Bangladesh, the nation. They're different, they overlap. So we are also, I think, you know, people who are affected by more than one history. We're affected by partition as well as the Liberation War. And so, I think we all are always navigating in different ways, different degrees of intimacy and separation from the concept of home, the concept of motherland, and then therefore a lot of that material. And then, yeah, I mean, writing as a trauma response, I'm personally not interested in whether writing is or is not therapy, or should not be catharsis. I'm not invested in that cosmic battle, but I understand why it happens. And I guess in terms of thinking about advice for writers who are struggling with this material, I think the fact that the material is a struggle is part of it. I think it has to be, in a way. Like, I think that, you know, like we're facing as communities such, you know, problems that are brand new, you know, I think every day. And some of them are maybe old problems, some of them are maybe inheritances, but a lot of them are sort of new contexts for those problems, such as language barriers between us and our families, as y'all have mentioned, as well as, I think, our own varied interests. So I would say, if you're not interested in identity, you don't have to write about it. I think sometimes we feel as though we have to be dedicated to that difficult material, and we don't. I think that we can, you know, like, I think one of the hopes I have is that all writers of color writing in or out of diaspora give themselves the permission and the freedom to be devoted to what they feel that they want to be devoted to, whatever that is. And it doesn't have to be generational trauma. It doesn't have to be the war. And yeah, so I think that's one thing. To piggyback on self-care, I just think it's extraordinarily important in general. Just breaks, you know, immersing yourself in other worlds outside of those, being good to yourselves, being good to others. And I would say too that I think that the sort of distance we want to create between ourselves and the material is important. I think that dispassionate perspective gives us a lot, and it's a way of honoring the material, as well as being immersed in it. So I encourage my students to read in the social sciences or read psychology. I'm reading a book right now called The Body Keeps the Score, which is about the body's effect on trauma. So I think, you know, like, I think anything you can do to sort of regard the topic, whatever it is, in 360 is important. It's such a good book, right? It blows my mind, and then I have to put it down and walk away. And I always end up reading it while I'm eating, which is not maybe the best time to read that book, but yeah.
Thank you so much for your wisdom and experience, Tarfia. There's no questions in the chat, but that's okay, because we've had a wonderful conversation, and that means I get a hog to questions. But for this last question, to kind of bring us back to this event, Bengali New Year, if you could each share, yes, one positive event that you associate with this holiday. I'm just curious, and, you know, and kind of the light of we're not able to celebrate in person these days. What are we excited to celebrate in person with Bengali New Year once we're able to again?
Did you say our favorite thing or our favorite memory?
I said the best positive memory you had, but favorite thing I think is very much in that spirit. Favorite thing.
Yeah, I don't know if I have any specific memories, again, because it's been over 10 years. I would say, I mean, the like generic memories are like, yeah, it's just what I vaguely remember are the festivals. They're always super, super fun. They're kind of like carnival style festivals. There's a lot of food. They're like kind of like mini theme parks with like merry-go-rounds and things like that. The streets of Dhaka, that's the city that I'm from, are usually painted with white, red, and yellow paint. And yeah, the whole city just transforms and it looks beautiful. And there are huge like masks that people parade of like different kinds of animals, like tigers and elephants, and yeah, and the food is always great. And I feel like it's like one time of the year that the whole country or like the whole city kind of comes together and celebrates without any sort of like discrimination but I mean, there's been some bad news recently about that too. So there is some discrimination, but ideally there isn't, and traditionally, you know, there didn't used to be, from my experiences. So yeah, I just miss the general happy memories of going to festivals.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of all the colors. I think the colors are so beautiful. And yeah, I think about the colors and I think about Porta a lot. Like I just think about the food and how, yeah, it's pretty great. Yeah, food and colors.
Anything you wanted to throw in the mix, Anuradha?
So I was kind of thinking about, you know, like if I'm being honest, like growing up, like I think my parents did try to kind of like assimilate me, well, definitely assimilate me more into Bengali culture, but I was always resistant to it because there was so much racism in the very white parts of New Jersey that I was growing up in. And I feel guilty in that regard, you know, because they did like come over to this country and they wanted me to, you know, hold on to these values. And I think now that I'm older, I'd be more receptive to it. But we also live like not in the same place now. So I mean, when I have my own kids, I think that that would definitely be something I would want them to experience, like, you know, because it seems like everyone has these fond memories about, you know, like how you guys mentioned the colors and everything. And it's something I would want my kids to experience, you know, especially since it seems like, well, I hope the place that I used to live, there's a lot more Bengalis there now. And it seems like there's more diversity. My little cousins live there and they let me, I always ask them, like, is there a lot of racism or anything? And for the most part, they're doing well. They have a lot of friends, and I hope they, you know, have that experience. And when my own kids, you know, I hope to have a good relationship with them, and I, you know, and have other Bengali friends who I can help. Like, I don't know, there's just so much that I have to learn about. And I feel like so guilty admitting this because it makes me seem really whitewashed and stuff. And it's not like I was just like ashamed to be Bengali all these years because of all the racism growing up and stuff. And it's still something I'm trying to teach myself about. My parents were really excited about, you know, today being the new year and stuff. And they were like, oh, get some good food to eat and all that. But I've never like been able to have like that experience of like celebrating it with my family because, you know, they weren't into a lot of family stuff. But it is something I want for my own kids in the future.